Welcome to the Finding Your Gentle Spirit exhibit. I'm Polly Sievert, the artist and the creator of the Finding Your Gentle Spirit exhibit. Finding Your Gentle Spirit is a lifelong journey of exploration. It's about finding your inner peace. It's about finding your loving presence. It's about finding that deep underlying passion that exists in you. It's about finding your divine purpose in life. My prayer for you as you view this exhibit is that you will draw closer to your very own gentle spirit. Each piece in the exhibit has a story associated with it that is there to help to connect you with your gentle spirit. I also share with you all the materials and the process that I use to create each piece of art. You're going to be a little bit surprised at some of the materials that I use in my art. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to take you on a short journey, highlighting you with some of the techniques that I use to create my art. So please join me. As you draw closer to Barefoot Serenity, I want you to notice that there are layer upon layer of fabrics blended together. I think there's about 7 layers of fabrics in this piece, and you will see some of the early layers peeking through some of the outer layers. And I do this on purpose because I want the depth. And I use a special machine. It's called an embellishing machine. And it actually has no thread, and it has 12 barbed needles. And these barbed needles go up and down through all those layers of fabric, and they take the fibers from one layer and connect them to the fibers of the next layer, so it creates a sandwich. Now, I do add stitching to the pieces throughout the layers because it adds extra movement and texture. And it helps to make the water give you more the feeling that it's moving, like the waves are rolling in, and the sand like it's more of windswept sand. This piece can hang both vertically or it could hang horizontally, which makes it a very versatile piece of art in your house. So now I want you to imagine yourself walking along a beach. You may be collecting seashells, or in this case I was collecting rocks and driftwood, and you're listening to the waves lapping on the shore, and you feel the warm sand under your feet and the gentle breeze across your face. And remember how you felt in that moment, how calm you felt, how you felt. So when you look at this piece, you can get that same feeling for your present moment. Just for that moment, just go back to that memory. So enjoy that serenity tonight. This piece here, Intertwined, speaks to us about the inner weavings of our lives. Fragments of our days are actually interwoven with fragments of other people's days. Those people could be friends, family, co-workers, or even complete strangers, like somebody you'd see at the grocery store. But all of these fragments weave into what is called our life tapestry. So my question to you in response to thinking about your gentle spirit is, what spirit do you bring daily to your life tapestry? Is it a spirit that's rich in kindness and gentleness and love and joy? So it's something for you to consider each day. Now, as we look more closely at this piece, we will see the rich weaving of a variety of fabrics. I use velvets, I use recycled draperies, I use upcycled cozy sweaters, I use denim, cottons, and even yarns. Now, the rocks and the driftwood that are added to this piece are to help to remind us that we want to make sure that each day we weave some time in nature into our day, because nature has a way of causing a wonderful positive shift in our gentle spirit. And research even shows that just even 15 minutes outside can cause a wonderful shift for us. The piece we're going to talk about now is called Fragments of Flowing Water. My goal in this piece was to create an abstract representation of moving water. So I began with wool roving in blues and greens and blended those together onto wool felt using my 12 barb needle embellishing machine. Then I had this idea that moving water often has bubbles and froth along the shore. And I wanted to figure out what I could do. And one day I was working with my wires and I saw my stainless steel wire and I was like, ooh, that shimmers kind of like water can shimmer. What could I do with that? Well, what I came up with is that what if I crocheted the stainless steel wire? Now, I'm not an expert crocheter, which was fine in this purpose, and crocheting that wire was quite an adventure, but it was the perfect answer, and it created the abstract version that I was looking for. This piece has an added advantage of being able to hang both vertically or horizontally, which makes it very flexible if you want to redecorate or upgrade your house. Now, where do I get all my rocks? Well, I spend a lot of time on the shores of Lake Superior. I just love going there to re-energize my spirit and to calm my spirit. There's just something about the water, the waves, the rocks, and the driftwood. It's a perfect mixture for me. And I also love how rocks that I find up at Lake Superior are actually created out of granite, most of them. And I just love how nature shows us that, granite, that stuff that's your kitchen counters for a lot of us, can be transformed and wheedled down into small, smooth pebbles. And it makes me think about how can God and nature transform each of our gentle spirits? Nature is amazing in that it can take something that appears so lifeless like winter and transform it into something so vibrant like spring and summer. Well, the piece I'm going to talk about now is called Nature's Magic, and it begins with snow. Yes, that white fluffy snow. So what I do for that background is I prepare material, I twist and I scrunch and fold different material, and I put it in a container, and then I pile on about 8 to 12 inches of snow, and then I sprinkle powdered dye on the top of that snow. Well, we all know that there are only 3 true colors, red, yellow, and blue. So if we have any different colors, they have to be a mixture of colors. And in powdered form, you will see a mixture of different colors of granules in the powdered dye. Well, when I sprinkle that powdered dye on top of that snow, what ends up happening is as a crystal of snow melts and dissolves a granule of powdered dye, and then they drip through that snow onto the layers of the fabric, there'll be different colors dripping at different times because the granules are all different colors. And the end result is one of a kind and absolutely magical. It's also magical how nature takes water and waves with sand and will strip off the bark of a branch that has fallen into the water from a storm or wind, and will create it into a really smooth piece of driftwood. And it just makes me think again on how magical nature can be for our gentle spirits. Now, the other thing I'd like to tell you is there's another piece in this exhibit called Flowing Waters. I'd like you to go up and look at that because I use an everyday object that people sometimes have in their kitchens for straining called cheesecloth. And I've snow dyed cheesecloth. So check it out. I actually began my art career as a quilter. And this piece now that we're going to talk about called Perspective begins with what would be a traditional log cabin quilt, which actually was one of the first quilts I made when I began quilting. But I've done it in a more abstract and unique fashion. So what I did is I took a photo and then I created an abstract grid that I placed over the photo. And then I took each section of that grid and I created a abstract log cabin block. And there's a number of them that are pretty funky shapes. Once they were all created and joined together, Then what I did, because I think you're getting the idea that I like to add different layers into my art, is I added paint. I added buttons. I added hand and machine stitching to create extra layers and dimension. When you view a lot of my art, it will look different when you stand back. And then as you come closer to it, it becomes deeper and richer because you see all the texture. Now, something I want you to note is that our realities in our lives are really not based on fact or truth. They are based on our perception of reality or our perspective of a situation. So I want you to consider, if you were to shift your perspective about a particular person or a particular situation, that may shift how your gentle spirit is responding to your life, and it may also have a positive shift on your relationships. So when you look at perspective, I want you to make sure you read the story that's associated with perspective, and you will see the photograph of the actual inspiration for this piece. I think you're going to be kind of surprised at what I began with as my original inspiration. So I look forward to hearing what you think about it. The piece I'd like to talk with you about now is called Vintage Tales. It begins with a sawmill tailing. Now, what's a sawmill tailing, you ask? Well, a sawmill tailing is what remains behind after the log is run through the sawmill to remove the outer bark before it gets formed into the boards that you would buy at your local improvement or lumber store. These sawmill tailings are from the early logging days in the upper Midwest that ended in the mid-1920s. They have actually been preserved in rich tannin water, lake water, for almost 100 years. When you look at the tailings, you will notice on some of them there's etchings and there may be some color changes to the wood. Those are all natural. I did not add anything. I only sealed them to preserve them. Now, the fish that are on the sawmill tailings, as well as in the shadow boxes, and as well as my fiber dragonflies, are created with a special process that I use that combines paper with fabrics into a new fabric that I can actually stitch. And some of the materials that I use are quite interesting. I use vintage laces that I maybe even have hand dyed. I use hand-painted pages. They may be book pages, they may be old musical scores. I also will hand paint the recycled insides of those security envelopes that your bills come in because they have really cool patterns. I will use those. I will use batik cottons because I like how many color variations that they will have. I've even used silk ties, and you'll see that one in a piece called School Tales that's in the exhibit. Those are just a few of the materials I use. So when you go and look, really compare all the fish in the dragonfly, and you'll be kind of amazed at how different. There's some that are really traditional fish, and there's some that are a little bit more funky. So whatever your gentle spirit likes. Shoreline Symmetry is one of my long and skinny pieces that I created for those narrow niches in your home or office. Very often we don't want to put drapes up anymore over our windows, but we still want something above or between our windows. And these long and skinny pieces are perfect for those spaces. Now, Shoreline Symmetry, this background, I created with a different hand dyeing technique. It is using indigo dye. So now indigo dyeing requires me to have a 5-gallon bucket, indigo dye and hot water, which I mix those together in the bucket, and then I let it sit because it's got to sit for a while. And then I've got my fabric that's prepared to go into it. Now this is where the fun begins. So I have to slowly submerge my fabric into the vat, because I don't want to get oxygen into the vat because indigo needs oxygen to react, but I want to wait on this to happen. So I slowly submerge it in. I leave it in for as long as I want, the longer, the darker. And then I slowly pull my fabric out of the vat. When I bring it out, you would expect to see blue, indigo blue, but no, it is bright chartreuse green. Kind of scares you a little bit the first time you do it. Wow, this is the cool part. So when you bring out that piece and it's in the air, so oxygen is reacting now with the dye, the indigo dye is getting oxygenated, then it turns into the rich indigo color. It's quite a fascinating science project. So then, also on this piece are a number of pieces of driftwood and a number of rocks. And they're kind of to help us remind us that we're all unique and we're all on our individual journey in finding our gentle spirit. And they also are there to help to remind us that just take a moment to just pause in front of the piece and take a break in nature and realize and remember how calming time in nature can really be. This piece here is called Jungle Jamboree, and it is part of my collection of early learning quilts. And they can be used as playmats, lap quilts, or even wall hangings. They're more than just quilts though. They're actually developmental tools for babies through early elementary age. Babies need time on their tummies. Time on their tummies helps to strengthen important muscles for turning their neck and for crawling. And crawling is actually very important for babies because crawling deals with crossing the midline, which deals with bilateral coordination, which helps to wire the brain to be able to help a baby to walk, then to help a child to be able to read, write, and do other fine motor skills. And you can read more about this in the story attached to Jungle Jamboree. In my early learning quilts, I put a lot of black and white fabrics because black and white are the first colors seen by babies. So it provides a lot of stimulation because they really don't like tummy time. But if you put black and whites on there, they're stimulated and they want to spend more time on their tummies. And you can move them from one part of the quilt to another part of the quilt to get them reinterested. So now as a baby grows up into a toddler and an early elementary age, the great thing about the early learning quilts is they come with a variety of fun games to play that can involve counting, colors. If there's animals, it can involve animals, it can involve shapes, it can involve ABCs. It all depends on what is on that particular quilt. And I do provide a written list of possible games with each quilt. Thank you so much for your interest in the Finding Your Gentle Spirit exhibit. My hope for you is that you may connect more closely today and on a daily basis with your gentle spirit. If you're interested in purchasing any of the pieces in this video or in this exhibit, please contact me through my website, which is www.gentlespiritstudio.com. Thank you so much and have a blessed and wonderful day and week.